Some people lose their way in the snow. Others find out who they truly are. The wind howled across the empty county road, lifting powdery snow into the fading afternoon light until the world became nothing more than shades of white and gray. Claire Bennett pulled her worn winter coat tighter around herself as her boots crunched through nearly 8 inches of fresh snow, each step heavier than the last. Beside her, 6-year-old Lily struggled to match her mother's pace, her tiny mitten wrapped firmly around a faded red leash attached to a trembling golden retriever whose thick fur was dusted with ice crystals. The dog looked exhausted but gentle, glancing back every few seconds as if hoping familiar faces would suddenly appear through the storm. Claire smiled softly despite the ache in her feet. "You're almost home, buddy," she whispered, more to encourage Lily than the animal itself. Nearly 2 miles earlier, they had spotted the frightened dog wandering alone near the edge of a frozen creek, while most passing cars continued without slowing. His expensive leather collar carried no phone number, only an engraved silver tag with a single address several miles away. Claire had checked the map on her aging phone, noticed the distance, looked at the rapidly darkening sky, and still made the same decision she always made whenever kindness demanded more than convenience. She turned away from the bus stop and started walking. Lily had never questioned it. Children often accepted compassion long before adults complicated it with excuses. The little girl skipped carefully beside the dog despite the cold biting through her boots. "Do you think his family is worried?" she asked. Claire nodded. "If someone you loved disappeared in weather like this, how would you feel?" Lily hugged the leash closer. "I'd be scared." Claire smiled again. "That's probably exactly how they feel." Their apartment was in the opposite direction. Claire knew she still had groceries to buy before dinner, knew tomorrow's rent was already overdue by 3 days, and knew the extra miles would leave her legs sore before another 12-hour shift at the neighborhood diner. None of that seemed as important as returning a frightened animal to the people waiting for him. The neighborhood slowly changed from modest brick homes to quiet streets lined with towering oak trees and elegant stone gates decorated with fresh Christmas wreaths. Lily stared wide-eyed at houses that seemed large enough to fit their entire apartment building inside. "Mom," she whispered, "people really live here?" Claire laughed gently. "They do. Do they ever get lonely?" The question caught Claire by surprise. She looked at the enormous homes standing silently behind snow-covered hedges. Warm lights glowed through wide windows, but somehow they seemed farther away than the little apartment where every laugh echoed off thin walls. "Sometimes," she answered honestly. "Big houses don't always make life feel bigger." Just as they reached the final driveway listed on the dog's tag, several black SUVs turned sharply around the corner, their headlights cutting through the swirling snow. The lead vehicle stopped so suddenly that fresh powder drifted around its tires. Before Claire could react, the driver's door swung open and a tall man in a charcoal wool coat hurried into the storm, his face filled with relief the instant the golden retriever barked and ran toward him. The golden retriever leaped through the drifting snow with joyful energy, nearly knocking the tall man off balance as he wrapped both arms around the dog and laughed with the kind of relief that only came after hours of fear. "Max," he whispered, burying his face into the thick golden fur. "You scared me to death." For several quiet seconds, nothing else seemed to exist. The wind softened. Snowflakes settled gently across the man's dark hair while Max wagged his tail so hard that his entire body shook with happiness. Claire watched from a respectful distance, brushing snow from Lily's knit hat without saying a word. Some reunions belonged only to the people living them. Finally, the man stood, his blue eyes moving from the dog to Claire and then to Lily. Gratitude filled his expression before he spoke. "You found him?" Claire nodded. "He was wandering near Miller Creek." The man glanced toward the road as though imagining. "The distance? That is almost 2 miles from here." "A little more than that," Claire answered with a tired smile. He kept stopping to look behind him. The man looked down at Max, gently scratching behind the dog's ears. "He has never run away before. Fireworks frightened him last year, but today—" He stopped, shaking his head as if the explanation no longer mattered. He stepped closer and extended his hand. "My name is Ethan Walker." Claire accepted the handshake politely. His gloves were warm. Hers were damp from melted snow. "Claire Bennett. This is my daughter, Lily." Ethan crouched to Lily's height. Thank you for taking care of my best friend. Lily smiled shyly. He was really cold. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and produced a clean handkerchief, carefully wiping melting snow from Max's face before looking back toward Claire. Please let me drive both of you home. You have already done far more than anyone else would have. Claire glanced at the line of black sport utility vehicles waiting quietly behind him. Their engines idled softly while drivers remained inside, pretending not to watch. She looked down at her boots, now soaked through from the long walk, then at Lily, whose cheeks glowed pink from the cold. For just a moment, Ethan thought she might accept. Instead, Claire offered a grateful smile that reached her tired eyes. Thank you, but we will walk. Ethan blinked in surprise. The weather is getting worse. Claire nodded. I know. It is another 2 miles back. I know that too. He hesitated before speaking again. At least let someone follow behind you to make sure you arrive safely. Claire gently shook her head. We will be all right. Lily looked up at her mother without questioning the answer. Ethan could not understand it. Most people would have climbed into the nearest warm vehicle without hesitation. Yet there was no pride in Claire's voice, no suspicion, no resentment. Only quiet dignity. She simply preferred to finish the journey she had started on her own feet. Claire adjusted Lily's scarf, smiled once more, and reached for her daughter's mitten. Come on, sweetheart. We still have groceries to buy before the store closes. They turned and began walking back into the falling snow, their footprints slowly disappearing behind them. Ethan remained standing beside Max long after they were gone, watching the small figures fade into the white horizon. For the first time in many years, a business meeting waiting downtown no longer seemed like the most important part of his evening. The snow continued falling long after Claire and Lily disappeared beyond the row of towering maple trees, but Ethan Walker remained standing in the driveway with one hand resting gently on Max's back. His security director approached quietly. Sir, the board dinner starts in 40 minutes. Ethan kept watching the empty road where the footprints had already begun fading beneath fresh snow. Did you see her boots? He asked. The security director hesitated. They looked worn. They were soaked through. He had noticed the dark stains spreading across the leather every time she took another step, yet she had never complained once. Not when the wind picked up. Not when Lily stumbled. Not even when she turned down the warmth waiting inside one of his vehicles. Ethan slowly walked toward the lead sport utility vehicle, but instead of getting inside, he stopped beside the driver. Find out where she lives. The driver looked surprised. Sir. Ethan immediately shook his head. No. Forget that. The words felt wrong the moment they left his mouth. Claire had not returned Max expecting anything in return. Following her home would transform gratitude into intrusion, and somehow he knew she deserved better than that. He climbed into the back seat, and the convoy rolled silently through the snow-covered streets. Inside the warm cabin, Max rested comfortably beside him, finally asleep. Ethan loosened his tie and stared out the window. Luxury had surrounded him for so many years that heated leather seats, private drivers, and endless convenience had become invisible. Yet one simple sentence refused to leave his mind. We will walk. It had not sounded stubborn. It had not sounded angry. It had sounded peaceful, as though Claire had already accepted hardships that most people spent their lives trying to avoid. Across town, Claire and Lily finally reached the neighborhood grocery store just minutes before closing. The automatic doors opened with a rush of warm air carrying the familiar smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee. Lily rubbed her hands together and smiled. It feels so warm in here. Claire brushed melting snow from their sleeves before taking a small shopping basket. She checked the folded list inside her pocket. Milk, eggs, oatmeal, peanut butter. The numbers mattered more than the brands. Every dollar had already been assigned a purpose before she entered the store. Lily wandered toward the bakery display, admiring a tray of decorated cookies shaped like snowflakes. She did not ask for one. She simply looked for a moment before quietly returning to her mother's side. Claire noticed anyway. She squeezed Lily's shoulder gently. Maybe next time. Lily smiled. It is okay, Mom. Peanut butter sandwiches are my favorite. Claire smiled back, although she knew that answer had been given to comfort her, not because it was true. 20 minutes later, they stepped outside carrying 2 paper grocery bags. The snowfall had become lighter, and the evening sky glowed with soft amber light from the street lamps. Claire shifted the heavier bag into her left arm before taking Lily's mitten once again. They still had another half-mile before reaching the small apartment building they called home. Neither of them realized that across the city, inside a quiet corner office overlooking thousands of lights, Ethan had canceled his dinner for the first time in years. Instead of reviewing financial reports, he found himself wondering whether the woman who had refused everything except the chance to keep her dignity had finally made it home safely. Morning arrived beneath a pale winter sky, but Ethan carried the previous evening with him into the headquarters of Walker Capital. The marble lobby sparkled beneath towering glass windows. Employees hurried toward elevators with steaming cups of coffee, and digital screens displayed market updates from around the world. Everything looked exactly as it had every other morning. Somehow, it all felt different. During the executive meeting, department leaders presented quarterly projections, expansion strategies, and investment reports worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Ethan listened politely, yet his attention drifted every time snowflakes brushed against the windows overlooking downtown. Numbers that once demanded his complete focus suddenly seemed strangely distant compared to one exhausted mother quietly choosing to walk home through a storm rather than surrender her independence. After the meeting ended, his assistant placed another folder on his desk. "These require your signature before noon." Ethan thanked her, then paused before opening the file. "Angela, can I ask you something?" She looked surprised. "Of course. If someone helped you without expecting anything in return, how would you repay them?" Angela smiled thoughtfully. "Sometimes people are not looking for repayment. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is respect why they helped in the first place." Her answer lingered long after she left the office. Ethan leaned back in his chair and stared across the city skyline. He had spent years solving problems with resources, influence, and opportunity. Yet none of those things explained Claire Bennett. She had accepted neither convenience nor reward. She had simply done what she believed was right and continued living her life. Across town, Claire's alarm had sounded before sunrise. She quietly slipped out of bed so she would not wake Lily, prepared oatmeal with the last of the milk, packed a simple lunch, and helped her daughter button a bright blue winter coat before walking her to school. The sidewalks were still lined with snowbanks left behind by yesterday's storm. Parents hurried from warm vehicles to the front entrance, while Claire and Lily arrived on foot with rosy cheeks and cheerful smiles. Before entering the building, Lily looked up at her mother. "Do you think Max is happy today?" Claire tucked a loose strand of hair behind Lily's ear. "I think he slept in a warm house with people who love him very much." Lily grinned. "Then I am happy too." Claire watched her disappear inside before turning toward the city bus stop. Her diner shift started in less than 40 minutes. She stood quietly among construction workers, college students, and retirees, each person carrying unseen worries beneath heavy winter coats. Nobody recognized her. Nobody knew what she had done the day before. Claire preferred it that way. Kindness had never been something she performed for attention. It was simply the way she chose to move through the world. Nearly 15 miles away, Ethan opened his laptop intending to review acquisition proposals. Instead, he found himself opening the city's online lost and found page. Max's missing listing was still active, complete with the photograph his staff had posted the previous afternoon. Thousands of people had viewed it. Only one person had chosen to spend hours walking through a snowstorm to bring the dog home. Ethan quietly closed the screen. For the first time in years, success no longer felt like owning more than everyone else. It began to feel like becoming the kind of person who deserved the trust of someone like Claire Bennett. The days settled into a quiet rhythm that almost nobody noticed except the people living inside them. Every morning before sunrise, Claire packed Lily's lunch, walked her to school, caught the city bus to the diner, and greeted strangers with the same gentle smile, no matter how tired she felt. By afternoon, she stocked shelves for a neighborhood grocery store, and several evenings each week, she cleaned offices after business hours. She rarely spoke about being exhausted because exhaustion had become as ordinary as the winter air she breathed. The calendar on her small apartment wall was covered with handwritten reminders. Rent due, parent-teacher conference, electric bill, Lily's library day. Every square was filled with responsibility instead of complaint. One evening after finishing her shift at the diner, Claire noticed an elderly customer struggling to carry 2 grocery bags across the icy parking lot. Without hesitation, She walked over and offered to help. The woman thanked her with watery eyes and admitted she had been afraid she might fall. Claire carried the bags all the way to a modest apartment building nearly 3 blocks away before quietly returning to catch the last bus home. She never mentioned the extra walk. It simply felt like the right thing to do. The following Saturday, Lily spotted a cardboard box outside an animal shelter with a handwritten sign asking for old blankets during the cold weather. Claire smiled, turned around, and walked home again. They gathered every spare blanket they could afford to give away, folded them neatly, and returned an hour later. Lily carefully placed the stack inside the donation bin. "Do you think the dogs will be warmer tonight?" she asked. Claire nodded. "I think kindness has a way of keeping everyone a little warmer." Across the city, Ethan tried to forget the woman who had refused his offer, but the memory refused to disappear. He found himself noticing acts of kindness that had once blended into the background of ordinary life. A receptionist patiently comforting a nervous visitor. A janitor helping someone pick up scattered papers without being asked. A young intern holding an elevator door for a delivery driver carrying heavy boxes. It was as though Claire had quietly adjusted the way he looked at the world without ever intending to. During lunch one afternoon, Ethan visited the company cafeteria instead of eating alone in his office. Employees seemed surprised to see him sitting among them instead of behind closed executive doors. He listened more than he spoke. He asked about families, children, and holiday plans instead of quarterly targets. Walking back upstairs, he caught his reflection in the polished elevator doors and barely recognized the thoughtful expression looking back at him. Success had taught him how to build companies. Claire Bennett, without realizing it, had begun teaching him how to notice people. That evening, as Claire tucked Lily beneath a patchwork quilt stitched years earlier by Lily's grandmother, the little girl looked up with sleepy eyes. "Mom, do you think helping people always comes back someday?" Claire turned off the bedside lamp and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Not always in the way we expect," she whispered. "But kindness is never wasted. Even when nobody sees it, it changes someone." Neither of them could have imagined that. Only a few miles away, those quiet words were already becoming true in ways neither money nor power could have planned. The following Monday began like dozens before it, yet something unseen had already started shifting beneath the surface. Ethan arrived at Walker Capital before sunrise, carrying a cup of black coffee as he overlooked the city waking beneath another blanket of winter clouds. His calendar was filled from morning until evening, but one appointment kept returning to his thoughts even though it had never been scheduled. Claire Bennett. Not because she had impressed him with dramatic words or extraordinary talent, but because she had quietly reminded him that character often revealed itself in moments nobody expected to be remembered. Later that morning, Ethan asked his executive assistant to gather applications for several open positions connected to the company's growing community outreach division. The department had recently expanded, and dozens of resumes had already been submitted. He intended to review them personally for the first time in years. As folders arrived on his desk, one application caught his attention. Claire Bennett. He stared at the name for several seconds before opening the file. Her resume was simple. No prestigious universities. No remarkable titles. Just years of steady work, customer service experience, volunteer activities, and excellent references from employers who consistently described her with the same words. Dependable, honest, compassionate, always willing to help others. Ethan continued reading every page. Attached was a recommendation from the manager of the neighborhood diner, who wrote that Claire often stayed after her shift to help elderly customers carry meals to their cars without being asked or paid. Another reference came from the local elementary school, thanking her for organizing winter clothing donations for children whose families struggled during the colder months. None of those acts had been listed by Claire herself. Other people had chosen to mention them. Ethan slowly leaned back in his chair. The woman who walked through a snowstorm to return Max had not experienced one extraordinary day of kindness. She had built an ordinary life filled with hundreds of quiet decisions that nobody applauded. Meanwhile, Claire finished another busy morning at the diner before hurrying across town to pick up Lily after school. The little girl raced toward her with a colorful drawing folded carefully inside her backpack. "Look what I made." Claire unfolded the paper. It showed a smiling golden dog standing beside a little girl, a woman, and a man beneath falling snow. Above them, Lily had written in large, uneven letters, "Kind people find each other." Claire smiled so warmly that Lily immediately wrapped both arms around her waist. "Our teacher asked us to draw a hero," Lily explained. "Everyone else picked firefighters or astronauts. I picked you." Claire laughed softly, blinking away unexpected tears. "Sweetheart, I am just your mom." Lily shook her head with complete confidence. "That is why." That evening, Ethan carefully closed Claire's application instead of placing it into the ordinary review stack. He did not move it to the approval pile either. He wanted every decision to remain fair. If Claire joined Walker Capital, it would be because she earned the opportunity, not because she had once returned his dog. Yet as he turned off the lights in his office, he could not ignore a quiet certainty growing stronger with every passing day. Some people changed a company by writing brilliant strategies. Others changed the people inside it long before they ever walked through the front door. 3 days later, another winter storm swept across the city, bringing heavy clouds that turned the afternoon sky into a dim sheet of gray long before sunset. Schools announced early dismissal, businesses closed ahead of schedule, and local weather reports urged everyone to stay indoors if possible. Claire looked through the diner window as thick snowflakes drifted past the glass. Her shift had just ended, but instead of heading home, she hurried toward Lily's elementary school with her scarf wrapped tightly around her face. She knew buses would be delayed, and she refused to let her daughter wait alone any longer than necessary. By the time she reached the school, only a handful of parents remained. Lily ran into her mother's arms with a bright smile that immediately faded when she noticed the snow falling harder outside. "Is it very bad?" she asked quietly. Claire squeezed her hand. "It is only weather. We will take one careful step at a time." Together they began the familiar walk home, choosing neighborhood streets instead of the bus route because traffic had nearly stopped. The sidewalks were slippery, but Claire never loosened her grip on Lily's mitten. They paused beneath the awning of a small pharmacy while the wind pushed another wave of snow across the intersection. A kind store employee stepped outside and offered each of them a cup of warm water. Claire thanked her sincerely before continuing on their way. Even during difficult moments, strangers still found small ways to care for one another. Across town, Ethan had just finished a meeting when his phone displayed an emergency weather alert advising everyone to avoid unnecessary travel. He glanced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office and immediately remembered another snowy afternoon, another long walk, and a woman quietly disappearing into the white horizon with her daughter. Without thinking, he reached for his coat. His assistant looked up in surprise. "You have another meeting in 20 minutes. Ethan shook his head. "Reschedule it." "Is everything all right?" He smiled faintly. "I hope so." Minutes later, his sport utility vehicle moved slowly through streets crowded with stalled traffic and snowplows. Max rested in the back seat, lifting his head every time the vehicle stopped. Ethan had no destination in mind. He simply could not ignore the feeling that somewhere beyond the swirling snow, Claire and Lily were facing another long walk. Meanwhile, Claire noticed Lily coughing softly as they crossed a quiet neighborhood park. She immediately knelt to straighten the little girl's scarf and zip her coat all the way to the top. "Are you cold?" Lily nodded but smiled anyway. "Just a little." Claire brushed a few snowflakes from her daughter's eyelashes. "We are almost there." She wished those words were true. Their apartment was still nearly a mile away, and the wind seemed stronger with every passing minute. As they reached a traffic light, several cars struggled to climb the icy hill ahead before slowly sliding back. Claire chose to wait patiently rather than hurry across the street. At that exact moment, a familiar black sport utility vehicle came to a gentle stop at the intersection. Ethan looked through the windshield, and before he could say a single word, he recognized the same determined mother still holding her daughter's hand with quiet strength, walking forward one careful step at a time despite the storm that seemed determined to test them once again. Before Claire could react, Ethan stepped out into the swirling snow, leaving the warmth of the vehicle behind without hesitation. Max barked happily through the rear window the moment he recognized Claire and Lily. Ethan walked toward them with calm, unhurried steps, careful not to make them feel cornered. "We meet again," he said with a gentle smile. Lily smiled back immediately. "Max remembers us." Ethan laughed softly. "He has been looking out the window every day since you brought him home. I think he was hoping he would see you again." Claire returned the smile, though though she kept one protective hand around Lily's shoulder. "I am glad he is doing well." Ethan looked at the thick snow falling around them before speaking. "Please let me drive you home this time. The roads are getting worse, and Lily looks cold." Claire glanced at her daughter. Lily's cheeks were pink from the wind, but she was still smiling bravely. Claire hesitated longer than before. It was never easy for her to accept help, especially from someone whose world seemed so different from her own. Ethan noticed the uncertainty and spoke before she could refuse. "I am not offering because I feel sorry for you. I am offering because I would hope someone would do the same for my family." The words settled quietly between them. There was no trace of pity in his voice, only sincere concern. Claire looked into his eyes for a long moment, searching for something she had learned to recognize over the years. She found no judgment there, only respect. Slowly, she nodded. "All right. Thank you." Ethan opened the rear door himself instead of asking his driver to do it. Max wagged his tail so enthusiastically that Lily laughed as she climbed inside beside him. The warm air filled the cabin, melting tiny snowflakes from their coats. For the first time that afternoon, Claire relaxed enough to take a full breath. During the drive, conversation came naturally. Lily happily told Ethan about school, her favorite library books, and how she wanted to become a veterinarian one day because every animal deserved someone to care for it. Ethan listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions instead of polite ones. Claire mostly listened in silence, grateful to hear her daughter laughing. As they passed downtown, Lily looked out the window and pointed toward the tallest glass building in the city. "Mom, that building is so pretty." Claire glanced outside. The illuminated sign near the entrance read Walker Capital. She remembered it immediately. Months earlier, she had submitted an application there for a community outreach coordinator position after seeing the opening posted online. She had never received a response and eventually assumed someone more qualified had been selected. Ethan followed her gaze and quietly understood what she was looking at. After a moment, he asked, "Have you ever been inside that building?" Claire smiled faintly. "Only once. I dropped off a job application there." Ethan turned toward her with quiet surprise. "For which position?" "Community outreach." She shrugged gently. "I guess they found someone better." Ethan remained silent for several seconds before speaking with complete honesty. "No, they never filled the position." Claire looked at him, confused. Ethan met her eyes with the same calm sincerity she had seen standing in the snow days earlier. "Claire, I reviewed every application myself this week. Yours is still on my desk. And after everything I have learned, I would like to invite you to come back for an interview. Not because you returned, Max. Because your life already proves everything that cannot fit on a resume. The decision will still be based on your abilities, but I believe you deserve the opportunity to show them." Claire spent the next several days preparing for the interview with the same quiet determination she brought to every challenge in her life. After putting Lily to bed each evening, she reviewed community outreach programs, studied nonprofit partnerships, and practiced answering questions while sitting at the small kitchen table where so many bills had once been spread before her. She never imagined herself becoming someone different. She simply wanted the opportunity to become more of who she already was. On the morning of the interview, she wore the only navy blazer she owned, carefully pressed the night before. Lily hugged her tightly before school. "You already help people every day," she whispered. "Now you are just going somewhere bigger." Claire smiled and kissed her forehead. "Thank you for believing in me." When she arrived at Walker Capital, she was welcomed with the same professionalism shown to every candidate. Ethan did not conduct the interview alone. A panel of department leaders asked thoughtful questions about teamwork, problem-solving, volunteer coordination, and serving families with dignity instead of charity. Claire answered honestly, drawing from real experiences rather than polished speeches. She spoke about listening before offering solutions, treating every person with respect regardless of circumstance, and remembering that sometimes the greatest gift was allowing someone to keep their pride while accepting support. When the interview ended, she thanked everyone for their time and quietly left, expecting nothing more than the satisfaction of knowing she had done her best. 2 days later, her phone rang just as she finished another shift at the diner. The voice from Walker Capital warmly informed her that she had been selected as the new Community Outreach Program Manager. For a moment, Claire simply stood still, unable to speak. Tears filled her eyes, not because someone had rescued her, but because someone had finally recognized the value she had carried all along. That evening, she and Lily celebrated with homemade pancakes instead of an expensive dinner. They laughed together around the little kitchen table while snow drifted gently beyond the apartment window. A few weeks later, Walker Capital opened its annual Winter Community Care Fair, bringing together local shelters, food banks, schools, and animal rescue organizations under one roof. Claire coordinated volunteers with calm confidence, greeting every family with the same kindness she had shown long before she ever entered the building. Ethan watched from across the room, proud not because he had changed her life, but because he had chosen to trust the person she had always been. Suddenly, Max pulled gently on his leash, trotting happily toward Lily, who burst into laughter as she wrapped her arms around the friendly golden retriever. The joyful reunion drew warm smiles from everyone nearby. Ethan walked over and stood beside Claire as families filled the hall with conversation and hope. "The day you returned, Max," he said quietly, "I believed I had lost a dog. What I really found was a reminder that character cannot be measured by wealth, titles, or success. It is measured by the choices people make when nobody is watching." Claire looked around the room at neighbors helping neighbors, children playing together, and volunteers serving meals with genuine smiles. "Kindness has a way of finding its way home," she replied softly. Outside, the last patches of winter snow were beginning to melt beneath the afternoon sun. People entered the building carrying heavy coats and left carrying something lighter than they had brought. Sometimes it was a warm meal. Sometimes it was a new opportunity. Sometimes it was simply the quiet assurance that goodness still existed in the world. And on one ordinary winter day, a mother who chose to do the right thing without expecting anything in return reminded a man who could afford almost everything that the most valuable things in life could never be purchased, only practiced.